Hey everyone, Dave Greco here, and welcome to my time lapse and commentary of Gollythank the Gnome. This was actually one of my first pieces that was given to me once I started kind of going more freelance last month, and I thought this was a really cool piece to time lapse and record, especially going into the holidays based on the theme of the piece. And really, what I wanted you all to see with this entire process is basically how I go from initial sketches to what I send the client, and then you're actually going to see quite a bit of changes on the piece as the time lapse progresses, and those are usually changes that I got from feedback. Actually, some of it was my own fault and was learning experiences. One big lesson to learn is definitely make sure you read the description through and through. There's definitely some things in these initial sketches that I think I just missed while reading the description and was pointed out later once I got further along, and that was definitely on me and something I know to pay attention to a little bit later. But hopefully everyone's having a great December and a good holiday season so far. So basically with this first sketch right here, the description was about this gnome tinkerer, and he builds these like mech bots, right? I actually, even in the initial description, totally missed the entire idea of it being Christmas. Or kind of like a Christmas elf, which was definitely right in the description, so that was on me. So I kind of made this gnome the way I thought it would be a cool way to make a gnome, and it had some description of the bot in the background. It's kind of like it had like a circular dome for a cockpit, and I was making these like two large legs behind it. But basically this starting point right here is I really wanted to figure out a good pose for the gnome itself. I had a good kind of vision in my head of like the light coming from the top, really can blow out the top of him, and he'll be such a focal character in the piece. And you can see I'm trying to figure out the proportions. I haven't drawn too many gnomes in the past. Most kind of gnome proportions in my head are kind of like how World of Warcraft gnomes look. So I was trying to make it a little bit different, but in my mind, that's what kind of gnomes are. I can also tell that like the legs might be a little weird. Where I have the legs right now in proportion to where the ground plane is probably isn't going to work out unless he's standing in water. And I'll go back and forth a lot, kind of shifting his waist up. Also, I wasn't sure what to do with his foreground arm. It was kind of throwing me off. So I'd rather keep my momentum going and keep working on the piece and keep figuring that out later if we have to. So I think actually Twitch chat, because we did a lot of this on stream, gave the ideas of him holding kind of like blueprints and plans, and I thought that was kind of a neat way to put it. I wanted this really large wrench resting on his shoulder. I thought it would be super cool. And I actually did a lot of this in one sitting. I had a kind of a big idea that I wanted to send to the client instead of sending them a whole bunch of thumbnails. I really wanted to kind of flesh this one out a little bit because I thought this was a neat idea and I thought they would be on board with it. So I just spent a little bit of time really just working on this black and white. This was all in one sitting, and that this was something that I would send to the client in the morning. And I usually kind of send an email with an idea of like, hey, this is the direction I think I'm going to go. What do you think? And I may pepper in some ideas in the email about kind of where I want to go to, right? So I think we actually had gotten feedback at this point from them, and they said like, oh, he needs a mustache. He needs his goggles on his head. He actually needs to have less hair. He should be more bald on top. This is very more of a specific character. And so that's really when I had to start taking feedback from the company and start addressing it into the piece itself. I liked how we had the hair to start, kind of like brought a lot of character to it, but sometimes you have to find a different way to make it work based on feedback that you get. And they also had a description of these like little triangle helper bots on the ground that would help him out. So I just kind of have him blocked in right now. So basically I'm taking that stage where I work in the black and white and I'm really just messing with values. I don't even go into the color yet just because I'm doing value stuff. We're making major changes to the piece. I figured I might as well not worry about the color. I really want to get the gnome's design to a point where I like it, right? And I want to spend a little bit of time fleshing out the parts of the robot in the back and really kind of see where it can go. This is also where I think I realized it was a lot more Christmas oriented. So we put some like candy canes in the back, and even a lot of the description of his outfit. it definitely had more of a like a Christmas elf description of like tassels and the pointy shoes, but he still had like a, a blacksmith apron, or it was all covered in soot and all that stuff. So I actually didn't want to spend too much more time in the black and white. You can see we start fleshing out color now, and this is usually the same way we've seen it in the past, where I use kind of like light multiply layers, maybe a little bit of overlay, and then I want to go back in on a normal layer right here and just really start sketching it out. I can dive in, zoom in a little bit, and really kind of figure out the color and light on his face. I want to start pretty desaturated, like usual, and build up that saturation as we go. And I think I'm really just trying to find like a nice form for his beard, for his hair. I like the silhouette that we had for his whole body and standing there, so I wanted to go in and start finding the smaller shapes that are going to work inside of it, right? Like, let's figure out the design of his eyebrows, that little collar around him, and I'm going to slowly start pushing like a little bit more reds into his cheeks, maybe some of the blue light from the top. But this is definitely like a back and forth process, trying to figure out like how we're going to treat our lighting and how we're going to have that reflective on the character. It was weird too, because sometimes when you zoom out, his pupils actually look a little bit different than when I had him when I was looking and zoomed in. So that kind of threw me a lot. Like, it looked like his eyes were looking in different places, depending on how zoomed in I was. But I don't want to, spend a ton of time on the face. I think there's sometimes you want to kind of just dive in and like, let's just spend 3 hours rendering the head, because it's one of the most fun parts to render. But I try to make sure that I stay pretty zoomed out and I'm just working around the piece. I also know I want to get to a certain stage and then resend it over to the client for feedback. That's always super important, especially once I know I kind of had a bunch of direction the first time. I want to keep getting emails going back and forth, right? I don't want kind of any more surprises as we go. And then just finding out lots of little details. I think there was a little time spent trying to figure out this backhand holding the wrench. I was having some kind of like stylistic issues on the direction his hand was going to be facing. And then something like, you can see this in like a lot of pieces. If I just get like frustrated, I can't figure it out, I'll just leave it blank, keep working. I don't want to get hung up when there's so much of the piece to be figured out, to be only focus on the hands, especially with gripping around it. Because then there's a part of me that's also like, well, let me just do this, and then later I'll actually grab like a broom or something and get some exact reference. So I'm actually getting the palm and the fingers in the direction that they need to be. And so it's always like, oh, I'll tackle that later. I know the idea that I want. It's going to get in there. I don't have to fret about it too much. And I wanted to get the size of the hands and all other body parts pretty accurate as well. But basically the same thing here. I'm running around. I figured the gnome's getting to a kind of like a 30%, 40% point, right? Let's start kind of shooting around the rest of this piece. There's so much of this robot and the environment that has not been touched. And I really want to get to that. At one point, there will be a little skip in the time lapse. Once we start going into color, it's going to look like it skips like 3 hours of work and go more into color. I think there was a process where I was going back and forth with them, and I didn't have OBS recording. So I do apologize. There's a bit of a skip at one point, but it's basically going to be showing this kind of same process as we go. I think I was just, sometimes I get slammed with a bunch of work. I try to get it done a little bit faster. But going forward, I am trying to record as much as possible, especially with a lot of client work, and they give me approval to kind of release this type of stuff, which is really fantastic. So I love showing you guys like my complete start to finish, especially on a piece that gets a back and forth feedback with the client. It's not just like, a personal piece of fan art that I enjoy doing, which is great, but this is kind of like more like real work that I hope you guys can kind of take something from. So we actually spent a while kind of rendering things out without tackling his hand. It's funny, I haven't actually watched this in about a month. This was done last month, maybe about a month ago. So it's kind of interesting to go back and watch this entire process. You can see that like the piece itself still needs like a lot of contrast. Like I haven't really hit like a lot of darks. Everything's kind of like these mid-tones, right? Trying to figure out small specific color areas and trying to see what works. I can tell that like there's a bunch of that purple and violet, over to the right. Like I like the idea of this blue and purple back there, but I wasn't sure kind of where to take it. I also wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with the background. Like I didn't know if it was in a hanger or what. I didn't want to go make it seem too futuristic. I think ultimately I like this idea of this kind of like hangar tech workshop in the North Pole. So I know I wanted these like cool blues of like snow and Arctic winter up there, kind of, especially if we have so much warm light on the foreground. Yeah, I thought that would contrast nicely with the cool blues in the back. And I really wanted to play that up. I'm really trying to focus more on color temperature lately and how that affects a piece and how you look at a piece, how you read a piece, and the story that it tells. So that's definitely something I've been trying to focus on. And so you can even go back and see some of the small stages. So I'm going back, kind of re-rendering. I think I just knocked out the entire arm completely. Kind of re-rendered that, and I was like, maybe we'll just tackle the whole arm again. Starting to flesh out some background objects. Like I said, it's always a lot of back and forth. So right here, you're going to see the skip that I was talking about before. There was definitely a bunch of color and contrast added, but I wanted to focus on the big thing right here. If you notice in the background, the robot now has arms. It was basically sent to the client saying like, oh, he needs more than feet. Let's add 2 kind of giant robot arms also sticking out and controls on the inside of that dome. So that was, I had blocked out some arms, sent over the arms real quick for approval. I got a thumbs up on location of them. And so then we went into rendering. And so you kind of see those arms on the side there. I'm trying to shift them around, see kind of what we want to do. And I actually think the piece became a lot stronger of a piece once we added those arms in. I think it kind of added a little something, so I just needed to kind of go in and kind of figure out their shapes so it worked and wasn't super, it didn't take away from the rest of the piece, right? I was like, oh, I think I can get these in here, add some cool lighting that actually will give even a little bit, even more to the background of the entire piece. And so basically from the skip, which was probably a few hours of work, you can see like I might have used like a little bit of overlay layers to kind of punch up the color a little bit more. I did a little more kind of back and forth of going a little bit darker on some parts, creating a little more shadow shapes, and then bringing up the light, right? And I was kind of brought a lot of the light in his face to what was probably be like a 90-95% of like how bright we want our brights to be. I kind of wanted to get that decision made so we can definitely kind of take a look at it. Also, some things you're going to see towards the final 2 is kind of more feedback from them based on the sphere of the bot itself, of it more feeling like a Christmas ornament, kind of more gold. And I'm not sure if I actually have any timeline set up, but there's actually some like filigree that's added, kind of like a Christmas ornament. And so it's just kind of doing more and more as we go. I started putting lights on and bells and all kind of like, kind of Christmassy decorations, which I thought were pretty cool. Like we need to amp up more kind of Christmas in the piece. You go up, kind of figure out the cockpit. Just tons of back and forth. You guys are just going to see that. And with most artists working on this stuff, a lot of back and forth, just kind of hopping all over the piece. I was trying to make like a little satchel on the top left that kind of would hold gifts or who knows what. I kind of was hoping that this would turn into some crazy mech battle where, Santa has some, Megazord version of like 5 bots that come together and then they have to battle out in the open tundra of the North Pole. There's like snow yetis, all that stuff. That'd be pretty awesome. Maybe we'll paint that later. But I'm really kind of punching up back and forth. I know I have to kind of figure out some more foreground elements because it's a little flat right now. But I'm starting to like how the light in the background is creating some nice shapes and everything's starting to read well. And I feel like everything is reading well from a distance. And that's super important for me. All right, so throwing some candy canes in there. I think we just really need to start Christmasifying the entire piece. So you can see I can start adding elements more and more in there. What's great is like, especially painting digitally, right? It's we have the painting, then we could just kind of make new layer sets and just have fun and just dump objects all over it. Just apply the same lighting, and we can just keep fleshing in more and more detail. And this piece actually took me probably a good 20 hours or so. I did spend quite a bit of time on this one. It was pretty detailed and a pretty large image. I really wanted a lot of this piece to feel right. It was so different than a lot of the work that I do that I thought it would that it was a lot of fun. I really wanted to dive in pretty heavy on it. Yeah, we're just punching up a lot of the stuff on the side. A lot of people ask me, when do I feel like a piece is done? And it's usually when all the small areas all around the piece aren't really bothering me anymore. Like I can see the robot hands and stuff, like all the shapes and the kind of outline and highlights, they feel pretty good. You could go in and really render them up and chrome it up and find all these little things. But if I just spend enough time kind of rendering the entire piece and it's not really bothering me anymore, there's nothing kind of itching in my brain that like I need to figure out this section more. That may change over time as we grow as an artist. What we consider is complete or not. It's always gonna fluctuate. But at the time being, once I just need to know that like when it feels satisfactory enough, I can move on to the rest of it, and then at the end finally call the piece done, because you can't tackle these pieces forever, right? You really have to know when you have to kind of try to call it quits on it. You have so much other work and you're trying to move into other stuff. It's pretty important. Same thing, just trying to find more smaller details on the mech. The mech was a very large piece, and actually part of the description was little parts of his wrist guard. And then if you actually see the final version in the JPEG, that I put at the beginning, and I'll put another shot at the end, he actually has a different one. It's more kind of like more kind of clockwork and more watch looking, and that was based on feedback from them also on what that piece should look like. And so I really wanted to, so we really had to kind of nail that. But that does the kind of small edits at the end. I don't usually throw OBS on, I just record like the little bit. So, but you'll kind of see it in the final image. And then we can take a look at that. But I hope this commentary was at least pretty useful. Hope you guys made it to the end here. This was a really cool piece to work on, and the group that I worked with, really, really amazing. If you're interested in checking out this content, this was done for the deckofmany.com. This is the Big Bad Booklet number 5. And so you can check that out over there if you want to get into kind of more specifics of what this was created for. But guys, thank you so much. Definitely subscribe to the channel for this type of content. And thank you so much for hanging out with me while we keep on working. All right, I'll see you guys next time.